Hans Nichols, are you there at the White House for us?
I am here at the White House for you. Look, I think just building on...
Yeah, I just want to put the same questions to you. I mean, because it would seem that this White House isn't capable of particularly sophisticated human responses, and the people who cause them the most alarm are the people who heard that call. You know, Donald Trump is the only human being on the planet who describes the call with Zelensky as perfect. Literally, none of these Republicans who seem willing to do anything in their service of him have described that call as perfect.
But yet the president just repeated that most recently, just about an hour ago, when the pool was brought in, right? And this is really the bunker that the White House wants to fight on. They want to fight on that July 25th call log memo transcript. That's why you're going to see Morrison come out, do a bit of a flanking maneuver on Vindman. Clearly at the White House, they think the afternoon is going to be better for them than the morning. They've been anticipating this throughout the day. And you look at the official response. Yes, there's that tweet going after Vindman's judgment, questioning his judgment with that quote from Morrison. You have an official White House statement. That official White House statement is basically saying nothing to see here. That's the bottom line. They say it's like nothing new. There's been nothing really that was that interesting. But if you did look closely, what you would see is that Vindman corroborated that the call log, call memo, call transcript was not altered. That's really what they are seizing upon, because, to Garrett's point, the White House wants to they want to shrink this and have it be just a conversation about the call log. I would note that the president watched this morning. How do we know that he watched? Well, he told us that he watched. He had some color commentary on the outfits, the bow tie of Mr. Kent, and he also indicated that he thought that the Republicans were killing it. And at the same time, he's been on Twitter just now, and he's retweeting a lot of clips that they think are favorable to them. So we'll see if the president gets any of the afternoon in, and if we have another chance to talk to him. Nicole?
Hey, Hans. Ari Melber, on that same point, what are you hearing from the White House, from the president on down, about which advocates they think are serving them best on the Hill? We've seen Jim Jordan step up as a bit of a pinch hitter. We've also seen Lindsey Graham, who's not a part of today's proceedings, take a pretty public role both to the cameras today as well as online.
Congressman Jordan, Radcliffe, these are their favorite ones. We know this because these are the ones that the president is retweeting. The president seemed to sort of criticize Nunes there briefly, because it was Nunes that asked and had that question to Vindman, and the president seemed to be suggesting that exchange where he called him Mr. Vindman, not Lieutenant Colonel Vindman. The president seemed to acknowledge that maybe point to Vindman there, and that Nunes lost something there for style points. So, but I think clearly Jordan, clearly Meadows, as Mr. Radcliffe as well, because remember, Radcliffe was going to come in and be DNI. So the president has his defenders. He likes the pugilists that are out there, and that's certainly the ones that I've just mentioned. And you get a good sense for this just by watching the president's Twitter feed on who he's retweeting as they try to capture these moments, right? Most of America is not going to be watching this wall to wall, and the White House understands that. So they're trying to create certain moments and have those moments drive the narrative, instead of what we just saw, which was this long testimony from two career officials talking about what they saw up close.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.